Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of a Grace-Filled podcast. Today I am very excited for what we're going to talk about because I have heard this story so many times, but this week, or actually right before I'm recording this, I just read the story again, and as you develop in your faith, you begin to see all different avenues in a story. I'll be reading through any story in the Bible, and I'm like, oh my goodness. There are just so many nooks and crannies and lines and verses and all sorts of things that just relate so much to our life and how we should live and what we should do. And so today, we're going to go ahead and jump right on in to the story here today. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 3. So, of course, if you have your Bible, go ahead and turn there. If not, if you're driving, if you're doing something where you can't get out your Bible, it's okay. We are going to go over this, but I do suggest you go and read through it again at the end. All sorts of things like that. Normally I like to start off with a story, that really gets people involved or prepared for what I'm going to say and relate it to my life. And I don't have an exact story. There's probably going to be the one that comes to me as we go along. But today is really all about just trusting God. And I know I've talked about this so many times, in other episodes, or maybe hinted on that. But that is something that I am struggling with right now. Okay, maybe this is just my story, okay? I am struggling to trust God currently. There is one situation that, I don't know if y'all ever seen it on Instagram. You probably have, because it was circulating around. It goes with what I'm talking about, but it's the image of the little girl holding a teddy bear, really tight, saying, Jesus, I want to keep the teddy bear. I love this teddy bear. And Jesus has a big teddy bear behind his back, a gigantic one, bigger than what she is holding. And he's saying, just give it up. My daughter, just give up the teddy bear. And I have something better for you. She couldn't see the teddy bear behind his back, but it was there. And so I say that because I'm trying to trust God in this one situation that I am holding on to. I am holding on to so tight in this situation. And it is so difficult to let go. And I feel like I've tried to let go for so long, and I haven't been able to. And so I said on my first episode, I want this to be a comfortable space for everybody. And so right now, to anybody watching, I said this before, I don't have a lot of people watching, but still, if y'all could just, pray for me, pray for learning to trust God right now in this moment. I think God knew that more than anybody listening to this, what I'm about to share, I need to hear and know everything that I'm about to say. And it's so difficult, when you want something badly, but you're not supposed to have it. And you also know that if you're a Christian, you're supposed to walk in the opposite direction of that thing you want. It's a weird place to be, because I feel like for so long, just as a Christian woman, whenever I was growing up, I always just thought about faith and trusting God as something easy to do. You know what I mean? Oh, okay, I trust God. I'm not gonna sin, I'm not gonna do all these sorts of things. It's okay. My way is not the best way. I'm gonna follow God's way. But there is still that innate desire within us, or there's the flesh that is in us. That's what's within us, is our flesh, and that draws us towards things that we should not be drawn towards. But I say all this because if you are going through something right now where it is just so difficult to trust in what God is doing, I'm with you. We are going through the same thing right now, because whether you're trusting in something to get better or you're waiting for a blessing to come towards you, I think I'm kind of in both of those situations right now. Just like, I don't know what to do. I want this, but God, I know I don't need this. I understand. It's okay. We're gonna get through this, but let's go ahead and dive in. We're gonna be focused on 3 main characters. Y'all all have heard this, and also I thought about this. Tonight I went to Publix and I thought about this just whole message when I was trying to figure out like just different Christian songs or something. And the song by Brandon Lake, "That's Who I Praise," came on, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this song. This is an amazing song. Brandon Lake did a wonderful job with the song "That's Who I Praise." It's amazing. So there's what he says in the song, talks about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So today our story is actually, or the message is based on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because their story was so impactful and so incredible. So let's go ahead and just dive into this today. I wrote some points down, which I normally don't do, but I realized that I'm a rambler. I could ramble on for forever, so I have some notes to keep me all nice and neat and on track. So if we're just gonna dive right in, let's look at verses 16 through 18. I'm not gonna read the whole thing again, because there's limited time, but please go and read it. Trust me, it is worth your time. It did not take me that long to get through it. And just make sure you really soak it all in, So verse 16 through 18, that says right here, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered. Actually, let me give you some context. I feel like that would probably help if you have no idea what I'm talking about. So, King, I think it's Nebuchadnezzar, correct? Yes. King Nebuchadnezzar, he had this golden statue of himself built in the middle of wherever he was at, and he had all these types of people. He has like so much land, so many people is under his reign, and he had all the like leaders, I guess you could say, of these people. There's different names for all of them, but all the little leaders came to King Nebuchadnezzar, and he told them that whenever you hear the music, the trumpets, the horns, blah 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 play, you're gonna bow down and you're gonna worship me. Well, as Christians who fall down and worship Christ, that's kind of contradictory to what we believe. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, of course, wouldn't fall down on their knees and worship King Nebuchadnezzar, because that's not their king. They were also captured. David was also in this story too. This is like in the beginning. They had different names. They were changed to Babylonian names because that's where Nebuchadnezzar is located. But then I don't remember exactly what happened. I didn't read through that first chapter. I just read through the third real quick. But they got promoted to a higher level. I looked it up. David was not in this chapter right now with the fiery furnace, but it said to believe like 2 different things could have happened. Either he was called away to like go somewhere else, so he wasn't even around the area at this time, or he was thought to be like too high up in his position that they didn't even call him into this situation. So David's not like stranded on the face of the earth, like we lost him. No, he's just not in this section right now. But with all of that said, there was, I guess, like kind of a rumor, I think you could say, going around, or someone just pointing fingers at the 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, saying, oh, these people don't bow down and worship you, King Nebuchadnezzar, blah, blah, blah. And before that, some more context is, as soon as Nebuchadnezzar built the statue of himself, he said, if like someone doesn't bow down and worship me, then they're going in a fiery furnace. Well, this accusation towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had them standing there, and King Nebuchadnezzar was like, okay, you're going to go in the fiery furnace. That's where you're going to go, because you're not going to bow down and worship me, so you're going to get that, and you're going to die. So we pick up here, verses 16 through 18. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king. If we back up, that was just the king telling them, or they're answering the king, who said, if you don't bow down and worship me, then you're going in the fiery furnace. So they're replying to the king. They answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So my first point relates to these verses, and what I wrote here, it says, either way, Christianity ends well. And I've thought about this before, not even in relation to this, but when we're looking at just Christianity as a whole, what it is, how it differs from different religions, how, like, what we believe happens in the end, what we know to be true when everyone dies, is very important to this right here, because either two ways could happen. Like, I read this quote about this before, talking about Christianity and why you should become Christian. There's literally two ways your life could go. The first way is that what you believe is 100% true. God is real, you go to heaven for eternity, and that's your life. And you served on earth, you served others around you, you led a beautiful life, and you end up in heaven. That's the first reality, okay? And that's what I believe to be true. So I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh my gosh, I believe the second one, like, God's not real. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm just telling you two different versions. The second one is that you die and God is not real, or something like that doesn't happen. Here's the difference between Christianity and other religions, though. In Christianity, number one, the main difference is that the person we serve actually came down and died for us. That's normally not what happens. It's normally us having to put in all of this work, or you see that in so many other religions. People are having to put in so much work to be saved for themselves. We can't save ourselves. So of course that's the first difference. But in my example, the difference is that, or what I'm trying to say with that, that's a better way to say it, is if you live your life like a Christian, which means you're not going out and drinking and doing all these things that you know you shouldn't do, or sinning, or I don't know, there's so many things that come to mind, especially when being a Christian, which to other people may not seem, fun and normalized, but you're actually living a better life. And also you're serving people and being kind to those around you. Either way, whether you believe there's a God in the end or not, that's a beautiful life to live. Wouldn't you want to be remembered as a kind person? Wouldn't you want to be remembered as someone who put others before yourself? Like, Christianity is a selfless religion because the person we follow was selfless. So then we automatically, going through that heart transformation, become selfless ourselves. And so I'd rather be in a religion that's not selfish. I 100% believe that when I die, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm going to see Jesus. But for someone who is still on the fence about that, no matter what happens in the end, you're going to live a beautiful life. And that's what I was saying here about this story. What Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were saying. They're like, we can either go into this fiery furnace, God's going to bring us out. That's the first way that could happen. Or we go in here and we're remembered as people who didn't bow down to you and stayed faithful and true to our God. And so either way, they would have led a beautiful life because they were dying for a cause they believed in, or they were being saved by the person they believed in. It was two beautiful outcomes. And so I love that kind of way of just thinking about our religion and Christianity, especially compared to others, because there's so many doubts in our world today. There's so many people, especially with social media, just pushing and pushing and pushing all sorts of different beliefs. You hear it 24/7. Until last year, I didn't realize the phrase like YOLO and follow your heart, be true to yourself. Like, you hear that a lot. I didn't realize that that's not a Christian way of thinking, because if you follow your heart and your desires and you pick your own truth, you're going to wind up in a very bad spot, because you're supposed to follow after Jesus, not your heart, and you're supposed to believe in God's truth, not your own truth. And so when realizing all of that, you start to put like a filter on what goes through your heart. If you're making coffee, you don't want the grounds to get into the coffee because that just tastes terrible. And that's the same thing here. You have that filter and you start filtering what goes into your heart, into your soul. Like even tonight, this is a good example too. I was watching The Bachelorette. I love The Bachelorette. Like the drama, I've got to say. It's kind of funny. But I was sitting there and a part of me just starts laughing at the way that they believe in love and how it works and what you have to do for love and X, Y, Z. And I'm like, I don't believe any of this. They were talking about like what love means, how it works. I'm like, that is not what I believe at all. But that's because I've worked over the years and I have a filter. I say, okay, I'm not going to digest every bit of information I have and keep that in my soul, because then I would be a person that doesn't even know who I am anymore. But because I have a set belief system, a set filtering out the bad and letting in the good, I'm able to become a stronger version of myself, all through God's help, of course, but it also leads me to have a purer heart. And I'm not about to sit here and say that I'm 100% perfect at this. There are times where my filter fails and coffee grounds get in my coffee, if we're using that example. For instance, music. Oh my goodness, music gets me. That is one thing that I struggle with because I love music. I could listen to music 24/7, which I do, and it's not always the best music. And so we all have things that we're trying to work on and trying to get through. But in the end, this is why I have notes, because I'm also starting to like veer off from my first point. But just in the end, concerning, I don't know, just everything about being a Christian, what you do with your life, like for me, filtering out bad music, whether that's like me trying to become a better version of myself for God or something like that, either way, not having that music in my life is going to bring a better outcome, because it's going to make me a better person, not having all that crappy stuff go into my head. And so, like I said before, I'm not saying that I don't believe in God. That's not it at all. What I'm saying is, though, Christianity is such a beautiful religion because of the way you live your life out. No matter what you believe happens at the end when we die, as a Christian, you will live a beautiful life. So that's where I'm going with that one. And it's also seen with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because they stood up to the king. And we're going to get into that we're going to get into that right now. So if we jump to verse 27, I put, with God, the devil has no power. That's my second point. With God, the devil has no power. Did y'all catch that though? I didn't say that the devil has no power whatsoever. I didn't say that. I said with God, the devil has no power. Because when I veer from God, when I'm not by God's side, when I'm not reading his word, when I'm not constantly, every single day, just devoting time to him, the devil gets to me. The devil speaks to me. And the devil tells me that he has power over my life, and uses words and uses people around me and just little things that come at me, and my guard goes down. Those Bible verses that shield my heart, that shield me, go down, and then the devil attacks me. So there's power there, of course, with the devil. But when I'm with God, who has the power now? Jesus. God, of course. He has the power. And verse 27, like I said, I'm going to read it real quick. Oh, it's our 2. It says, actually, no, it's on this page. I could not count for a second. I was trying to find 27 above 26, and that's not how it works. Here we go. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. There was another part where it said, oh yeah, I see it. I should have highlighted this, but in this verse it says, the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. And so what happened in the story is, like I mentioned earlier, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would not bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar, so they got thrown in the fire. But then King Nebuchadnezzar, I wrote this here, he saw the three of them standing there, and then there was a fourth person with them, which is believed to be Jesus. But I wrote here, it says that in the text, it says that King Nebuchadnezzar was like looking into the fire, and you think visually seeing a fourth person. And he actually asked people around him, like, did you see that? Did you see that? Like, is there a fourth person? Am I going crazy? But I wrote here that he was not like physically looking, but spiritually perceiving. I got that from Bible Ref, little shout out. I love Bible Ref, helps me understand what I'm reading in the Bible. But he was spiritually perceiving that spiritual being. And I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what happened, but just taking it from the text, taking that context out, it's like he had one of those supernatural moments of like, oh my gosh. And it was something, of course, because then he had so much awe and wonder for our God. And we're going to get into that soon. But I love the verse, or this part in verse 27. I'll read it one more time. It says, the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. Like, think about it. It said in the story that Nebuchadnezzar got so upset when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered him that he turned up the furnace like 7 degrees. And so this was a very, very, very hot furnace. And yet what happened? They walked out with no harm done to their bodies. The fire had not touched those men. And if we relate that to our life today, saying with God, like these people trusted God, walked into the fire, and came out alive. Now we put that in our life. If we trust God and we are with God, when we get put into a situation that the devil tries to attack us with, just like that fire not touching those men, Satan is not going to touch us because we are with Jesus. It doesn't mean we won't have battles to fight, of course, but we are with the stronger, powerful force. We are with the force that has already won and defeated death. And that is so powerful to remember that Satan has already been beat. We know how the story ends. It's not a surprise. The devil will not prevail. And so even in those times when you're thinking, if I was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I don't know exactly how they were feeling. Maybe it was like, okay, I 100% trust God. Like, let's go. I'm going to walk into this fire or something like that. I think there had to be some sort of nerves there because you're walking into a fiery furnace. You know what I mean? But I think just the way they handled it, at least, being able to have such faith and honor for their God that they're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing that I probably don't really want to do. I'm going to go and die for something I believe in. That is beautiful to me, honestly. And I think that's a true example of how we need to be. I thought about this earlier, like just thinking about the fire and stuff. I'm in ceramics right now, so we're making clay and all sorts of things. And for ceramics, one thing we learned was that there's different stages of clay. So there's like the slip, and that's when the clay is like super watery. You sometimes use it as glue. It's just like extra water. Then when the moisture dries out, it goes to like the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And in all 4 of those stages, once you add water to it, the clay can just kind of go back to what it is. But as soon as you go off and put it in the kiln, which is where it gets fired, it becomes harder and it can't move. And, ooh, that's good. The Holy Spirit, He is speaking right now. That is just how our life is. These people, I wrote here on this other verse, sometimes you have to burn for others to believe. We're going to get to the others believing part, but sometimes you're going to have to burn. Not necessarily like burning in a fire, but like metaphorically speaking, there's going to be trials and tribulations that you have to walk through. Just because you're with God, it does mean, that we won. Like I said before, the devil will not prevail, but still, you're still going to have trials and tribulations. But if you think about it like the clay hardened. It can't be molded back into what it was before. And so there may be times where before you walked through that hard trial or tribulation, you were just wavering back and forth, back and forth. You're like the clay that as soon as something else comes along, like the water gets added back into the clay, you can just mold back into whatever the world wants you to be. But once you get burned, like the clay in that kiln, you can't go back to what you were before. You're called to a different lifestyle. And so you're stronger because that clay is very difficult to break. It's a strong thing after it's been fired. And so you're a strong thing after you've walked through the fire, after you've walked through your trials and tribulations. Because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked through the fire. They came out completely fine, of course. But in the end, greater things came from them walking through the fire than if they had just stayed out of it. So if I just have to give some advice, which I'm also giving advice to myself too right now, walk through the fire that God is calling you to walk through. It's not going to feel good. It's not going to look pretty. People around you aren't going to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, maybe why you're going down the harder path. But it just reminds me of like the path of Christianity is narrow and the path of the world is wide. More people are going to go down the wide path and they're going to look at you on your narrow path and say, what are you doing? Come join me. This is easier. This is fun. But in the end, you're going to walk through the fire alive, not touched, not burned, and stronger than ever. And maybe you just need to hear that today. That whatever you're going through, it is for a purpose. Think about the clay. You know, God is molding you and then putting you through that fire so that you are stronger on Him and that you have a firm foundation. And then to add on top of that, like, God's just not going to leave you there. He's not going to be like, okay, you went through the trials and tribulations, go figure it out. Good luck. That's not what He's going to say. For the clay, you actually, Instagram was put like the gloss over it and it looks so pretty and it just shimmers. And I think about that with God. Like, He's not just going to leave you there. He's going to fix you all up. He's going to make you look better than you ever were before. Maybe not like looks physically, but just spiritually. You're going to be better than you ever were before. But it's all about taking that step into the fire. Because I know I keep going back to the clay, but when it's in those first 4 stages, it may look like it's dry, but it actually isn't until it gets put into the kiln. And so you may be a Christian that, this is confronting myself too, you may be a Christian sitting here like, okay, I trust God, I'm getting there, I'm getting close to the fire, I'm working on it, I'm becoming solid, you know, but then something comes along the way that wavers you and it's like the water that gets added back into the clay and you just get formed back to something else. But today, let God form you and mold you into what He wants you to be, not what you want to be for yourself. And so this also adds on to what I was saying before about sometimes you have to burn for others to believe. This is verse 29. It says, therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. That is being said by Nebuchadnezzar. Of all people, that was just said by Nebuchadnezzar. Because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked through the fire, and Nebuchadnezzar saw something that he had never seen before. And he was in awe with our God and how He saved His people. And so no, it didn't completely 360 change Nebuchadnezzar's lifestyle. He didn't, become a Christian automatically and boom, 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 this is just great, I love your God. That didn't happen. But he could tell there was something different about the Christian men who walked through the fire and came out different. And so you must remember that the people around you, especially people who are not Christians, are watching every single move you make. Every word you say that you shouldn't say, they hear. Everything that you do that you know you shouldn't do, they see. And yes, that's a lot of pressure, of course. And of course you're going to make mistakes because I personally, I love following people who do make mistakes and show their mistakes and get through those mistakes as well. But the thing you got to remember is people are watching you. And you never know how you act in one situation, like what God can do with that. Because somebody may see your faith and be like, man, that girl, that guy, they're different. There's something about them. Because Nebuchadnezzar was drawn in and had an awe for God by seeing those three men walk through that tribulation. So maybe somebody's watching you and they're just kind of in awe, like, what? What is different about that person? Like, they are going through a terrible situation, a terrible fire with the furnace 7 degrees higher than it should be, and yet they still have a smile on their face. They are still being the person that they've been called to be. They're not wavering. I don't understand what that is. And then maybe that will draw them towards Christ, just like that happened with Nebuchadnezzar. So take that away as well. Just be cautious with your actions. I'm still working on this. I'm still at fault with this. But we've got to be careful about what we are doing in our life, because there have been some time where I've seen somebody else do something and it was okay to do that just because I was trying to be like them. And so you think you have nobody watching you, but trust me, there's always one person who is just seeing what you're doing. Maybe they don't even like realize it, you're just kind of there, and your mannerisms lead them in a way. And make sure your mannerisms lead them in a way that is good, not bad. So the fourth point that I have for today is actually back up into verse 28. I put confronting others or talking about God in front of others may be difficult, but they will thanks God and acknowledge you in the end. So this is kind of what we just talked about before with Nebuchadnezzar. This is verse 28. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any God except their own. And so Nebuchadnezzar, like I said before, noticed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and what happened with their story. And I think sometimes as Christians, we, at least I know myself too, you see other people who are unbelievers, and it seems so difficult and so scary to walk up to them and try to start a conversation about God or try to say something about your faith. There's people out there that can just do that, boom. And I think that takes practice, of course. But for me, I'm still kind of timid in that area. Like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think about me? So I'm trying to work on that. But you never know what could happen. Because here, it was really difficult, like I said, for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to stand up for what they believed in. But imagine if they hadn't. Imagine if they conformed and they bowed down. What would have happened? Nothing. Exactly nothing. Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't have seen anything different, believed anything different. Nothing, the rules would have changed about bowing down to a god or bowing down to him. And all the people sitting there would not have seen the miracle of God. And so that so is a testament to your obedience as a Christian. Ooh, I got convicted there because I feel like with my situation I talked about before, with trusting God and not going my way, I feel like I gotta become more obedient to God. And so that's as for me as mine for you as well. Maybe if you are not obedient to God, I don't know what's gonna happen because God has placed you where He wants you, exactly where He wants you. And I think that's such a privilege, honestly, that the creator of the world has chosen me to do a job here on earth for him. And you think about that and you think about that responsibility that gets put on your shoulders. Yeah, it may seem like it's a lot of pressure, but I think that is a gigantic honor. That the person who does not need me have a reason to care about me, I give them God's any reason not to care about me and to walk away from me. And yet he's still waiting with open arms, saying, my daughter, come back home. I have a plan for your life, and I have given you a job that then you should be obedient and faithful to do. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they weren't obedient. That's what could have happened. And I'm not saying that God's plan won't always work out, but I'm saying, like, don't you want to be a part of God's plan? It's reading a handout and saying, join me in my plan. We can do this together. I have this job perfectly made for you to do. All you have to do is walk with me. Let go of the things of the world. Start trusting me. Go through the fire and let it burn you. But it's still gonna come out better on the other side. And when I say burn, I mean like going back to that clay reference of becoming different. Like God change you. Because not only was Nebuchadnezzar changed, I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were changed as well. Because they had faith and then they saw that faith work out in their life. They probably walked out, they're like, oh my gosh, like, God, thank you. You know? So it's everybody had to have some sort of heart transformation or some sort of pull towards God. And so just remain obedient. I know it's difficult. Like I literally, like I said before, I'm walking through a season. It is 100% very easy to be disobedient to God and walk in the direction that I want to go. But sitting here and just hearing the Holy Spirit in me, like, God has got a plan for me, God is putting me exactly where He's going to be, helps me know that I, I've got to be obedient to God. I've got to. And so do you. Because when we're obedient, it is a beautiful story that plays out. And it's all God's glory, which is a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. And so I hope that today you guys learn some more little nuggets of truth, some more things to add to your knowledge library, I guess you could say. I know I certainly did. And then, of course, for the few people that are probably watching, if you ever need to reach out, please do because I'm always trying to be vulnerable on here, always try to be open and honest. And so if you have any struggles,